Happy Devil's Thursday. This is At The Point. I'm your host, Sam Wu, here with the NHL analyst extraordinaire, Bruce Zeman, streaming live on Facebook Live, YouTube Live, X Live, and Twitch on the Let's Go Devils Network. I see that people are filing in at American Whiskey in Newark for the Devils take on the Vegas Golden Knights. Bruce, how are you, my friend? How you feeling? It's actually it was snowing this morning here. Icy.
Yeah, feeling pretty good. It's a little bit chilly here. We had a couple of days where it was warm, and now it's about 31 degrees here in Lewis Beach, Delaware, but still hockey weather, that's for sure.
Yeah, it's definitely hockey weather. Puxatawny Phil said, hey, 6 more weeks of winter, so it's going to be cold. I think it will be cold. I think the groundhog's right.
Yeah, I think so. It certainly feels like hockey weather, although I'm ready for the spring to get here and ready for the NHL playoffs. But we got a ways to go before we get there, but always a lot to talk about when it comes to the National Hockey League.
Yeah, absolutely. But I see Wimpy in the YouTube Live. Hello, Wimpy. All right, so it happened, I don't know if it was a week ago or it seems like a long time ago, but the Hartman suspension, 10 games. What are your thoughts, Bruce? Was it too harsh? Was it too little?
Well, a couple of things here. First of all, that's not a hockey play. There's no room in the sport for driving somebody's head into the ice like that. The big problem for Ryan Hartman, who has always kind of played on the edge, rather. You know, this isn't his first suspension or his second, third, or fourth. This is his 5th suspension and 4th in the last 2 years. He's considered a repeat offender. He's been fined a whole bunch of other times and rammed the head of Ottawa player Tim Stutzle into the ice, cut him open, and the NHL came down hard. He's appealing the suspension. I'm not really quite sure why, because if you watch the video, I mean, he drove his head into the ice, and he's going to sit for 10 games. It's almost a $500,000 fine. I think it's $498,000 and change. And the NHL sending a message that they're not going to tolerate this. And, we've criticized the Department of Player Safety before on our show, but I think they got it right here. There's just no place for that in the sport.
It's the inconsistency. I think they've gotten, as of late, to their credit, and I've been very critical of player safety. I think in the last month or two, I think they've been very consistent with their punishments, and I agree with you, Bruce. I mean, for a while there, I thought Matt Rempe was immune to player safety, but finally they gave him that 8-game suspension earlier this year, and I was like, okay, all right, you're finally getting it, all right. How many times does a guy have to get hurt or a player gets hurt before you start, levying real suspensions? And I think as of late, I think player safety has been pretty good. Hopefully I don't jinx it.
Yeah, I think you're right about that. And it's funny because if you watch the play in slow-mo, the way that he came down on Stutzle's head, it actually reminded me a little bit of the Todd Bertuzzi hit way back when on the Avalanche's Chris Moore. The way that he fell. And I mean, it was a violent hit. There's just no place in the game for stuff like that. And actually, I don't remember who said it, and I apologize for not remembering who said this, but there was one other analyst that said that, because Hartman is appealing this, there's one analyst that said not only would I uphold the 10 games, but I would give him another 2 games for wasting Bettman's time, because the appeal will be heard directly by Gary Bettman, the NHL commissioner. And then I believe if it's longer than 6 games, he can appeal it again to an independent arbiter. And we'll see what happens. I mean, I guess I'm not really surprised that he appealed it, but I would be very surprised if I don't know how, if you're the NHL, I don't know how you reduce that. I don't know how you reduce that suspension because of the message it would send.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, we shall see. Do you know when the ruling is going to be, or is they're long?
I was looking at that before we came on. I'm not really sure, but I'll tell you what, it should be a fun game the next time that Minnesota and Ottawa play. That should be a fun contest.
Oh, absolutely. But good kudos on the NHL, sticking to their guns on that. You can't reward bad behavior at all, and you don't want the players to take the law in their own hands, so to speak. Yeah, there was a time period where there was an unwritten code and all that, but right now you got to keep the game safe, and headshots and all that kind of stuff need to be out, especially if it's not in hockey context. All right, moving on, and I see in the show notes, I don't know too much about this, but former Blackhawks captain Jonathan Toews is attempting an NHL comeback.
Yeah, he's attempting an NHL comeback. He basically had, and I'm not a doctor by any means, but my understanding is that he had basically some type of illness that was almost like long COVID, I guess. He went on this big safari to try to get his health back. I believe he's 36 years old now. But at the time when this first happened, I mean, he was at the top of his game, one of the top players in the world, and he left the Blackhawks to try to get better. I mean, he's had this for almost 4 years, and he's thinking of coming back. There's a couple of teams that have expressed interest in him. I mean, he's certainly not the player that he once was. He's 36 now. But, there's a couple of teams that he would certainly be a contender. He would certainly help them become more of a contender, and it'll be interesting to see if he signs with someone for the rest of the season.
Now, I don't want to bring up another topic, but the last time I think, we know about the Blackhawks scandal. He was the captain of the team. Do you think that has any effect on any other team's interest, or do you think that's just, not related at all? Because again, it's been a long time since Toews has played, but he took a break. Because to deal with this, do you think that's going to deter teams for signing him?
That's a really good question, and I was thinking about that when I was putting together the notes for today's show.
Yeah,
I mean, it could, because Jonathan Toews took some heat because he was the captain of the team when that was going on there, and there's a lot of people that questioned what else he could have done to either bring that to light or bring some assistance to those involved. Again, you don't know what goes on in the room. You don't know what he did or didn't do because they kind of kept that kind of quiet. But I think it's a question you at least have to ask because although some of the other folks involved have gotten employment again, most notably Stan Bowman, he's now the GM of the Oilers.
Yeah.
Joel Quenneville has not gotten employment again, and Toews is looking to come back. I don't think it'll affect him as much as it would, like, say, at Quenneville, but I think it's something that you at least have to discuss. And I think before you brought him in, I think that the team would have to talk about that, because that's something that's certainly going to come up in the locker room.
And it's going to be certainly coming up in the media if he does come back at that first press conference. Those hard questions. Those hard questions, are going to come out. Now, again, I'm not accusing Jonathan Toews or anything.
No.
Or we don't speculate. But in my mind, if you're a media member, he kind of dodged it, because he was out for 4 years, versus, Quenneville, he went on a podcast, he had to answer questions from the media. So, and if you're a GM of a team, I mean, do you want that kind of baggage, so to speak, and having to deal with it? That remains to be seen. But, when I saw that in the show notes, I'm like, I didn't hear that he was coming back. But it's definitely going to be an issue when he does come back because somebody's going to ask that question, and what the normal NHL public relations response will be. It's going to be very dry and generic.
Yeah, and there's some teams that would certainly benefit from him, but again, I think you're definitely going to have to analyze the positives versus the negatives. I mean, the teams that are top contenders, like, for example, Colorado or Winnipeg, or even the Devils, teams that his experience, I mean, because he is a multi-time Stanley Cup champion.
Yep.
Now, it's certainly not going to hurt you come playoff time, but again, and here's the other thing, Sam, you know this, you've been around the game for a long time. This simply could be a case where, if you're in the leadership of a team, you may have to, just take it for the team. I mean, you're never going to know exactly what happened when and where in a situation like that because they're going to clamp that down.
Yep.
And it may be a case where it just has to be out there. What did he know? I mean, we never know what's in the room. You never know where some of the blame lies. And again, we're not accusing anybody of anything. It's just one of those things where, it happened and he had to see at the time. And, that's just the way it is.
Yeah. JT Miller, the big trade, about a week or two ago, New York Rangers winning big yesterday. What are your thoughts on JT Miller? I mean, he's a good player, depending upon your team situation. 31 years old, original Ranger. What do you think of him on the Rangers right now?
Well, he started with the Rangers, and he went to a couple of other teams, and now he's back. And, in doing my research for our segment today, there's writings out from a couple different sources that a lot of the Canucks players are not too happy with the way that this trade came down. There's some speculation. Again, these are from, sources inside the room. Take that for what it's worth, that maybe the Canucks traded the wrong player. But, yeah, I mean, so JT Miller's had a couple of points. I believe he's had 4 points in the 3 games since he's with the Rangers. There have been some analysts that have said, players like JT Miller don't grow on trees, and this makes the Canucks a little softer. But from everything I've read and some of the folks that I've talked to, the Canucks locker room has been, was a mess, and we'll see what happens. Because I'll throw this out to you, Sam. What happens if you've made this trade, you've gotten rid of your star players, and it doesn't really fix anything? What is your next move?
Well, I think the next move was they signed one of the 3 Petersons for a 6-year deal. I think that just coming over the wire. But all kidding aside, I don't know the dynamics of the locker room. You read the rumors and all that, but again, Rutherford's shaking up the team a little bit. Is he going to overhaul? And that's that we refer back to that NHL.com article that we talked about on the previous podcast on At the Point, that maybe this is step 1, Bruce. Maybe step 2 would be later. But would they go all the way at actually trading Quinn Hughes? I don't think so. Right now he's hurt. But, if that locker room is still a mess, they may have to blow up most of the team.
Yeah, I mean, you're right. The question is if you're going to rebuild, when you rebuild or retool, take your pick, you always have to have foundational players that will be the foundation of your rebuild. And while I'm not an NHL GM, I can't think of any other player that is more of a foundational player than Quinn Hughes. And if you were to move someone like that, you would need to get such a return, such a haul that if you didn't, you would absolutely get your head handed to you as a GM. I mean, that is, if you were to make a trade like that and it didn't work, I don't know how you keep your job as a GM. I mean, I would think that if that doesn't work, you're going to get fired.
Yeah.
I mean, who could you trade him to? Because defensemen, like goalies, don't grow on trees. I mean, no NHL player grows on trees, right? But what type of player could you get for someone like Quinn Hughes that would say that you, quote unquote, won the trade?
Yeah.
I mean, on from a defensive standpoint, who could you get that is, I don't think you're going to get Cale Makar or Roman Yossi. I mean, who are you going to get unless you were to get, I mean, a forward that is going to put up some crazy amount of points? I just don't see it. But, crazier things have happened. I mean, if you're going to blow everything up, if you get, again, I'll throw this out to you, you get 4 or 5 first-round draft picks, do you make that deal?
Well, which team is willing to pay the price in what situation? A Quinn Hughes would put a team over the top, any of these teams over the top, if they're on the cusp of greatness. But he's still young. I don't think they're going to trade him unless he requests a trade. If he just doesn't want to be there, But we're not saying that. But right now, JT Miller's out. They're probably going to see what's going on. I think it's important to know that we don't know what Rutherford's thinking. Maybe even Rutherford doesn't know what he's going to do. But it's important to know that if you're going to be trading players, you want to make sure that you have as much leverage as possible, especially before NHL trade deadline, to move these players and get a lot in return. So, maybe, Bruce, they're not really blowing it up right away. Maybe it's going to be like a sequential retool of the team as they go. But is the locker room going to improve? We don't know, but we shall see.
Let me ask you this.
Yep.
All right, let me ask you this. All right, I will say from the knowledge I do have, I don't think that the Canucks brass makes a trade like that without permission from ownership. I mean, the GMs usually, not in all cases, but they usually have some autonomy. I mean, you're not going to need the owner's permission to trade a fourth line right winger. But I think for a trade like that, you're going to need permission, or you'd have to get their blessing because, again, if that doesn't work out, you're going to be looking for another job. I mean, he's been in the NHL 7 years, Quinn Hughes. He's got 392 points in 412 games. He's the reigning Norris Trophy winner. But again, for some teams, that might make sense. And I'll tell you the team that I think that would make sense if I'm going to make that move. I would absolutely call New Jersey if I was thinking of seriously doing that.
Because of the talent pool and because of the brother connection. But Tom Fitzgerald's not going to get ripped off for it. He's not desperate.
He's not going to get ripped off. But again, this is one of those cases where if the Canucks call the Devils and say, listen, you can have him, you're going to give up somebody like Nico Hischier for Quinn Hughes. So I'll just put that out there. That's what you're going to give up for a player of that caliber. And, from a Devil standpoint, are you prepared to do that? I'm not sure that I make that trade, but I'm not in the GM chair. But that would, having all 3 Hughes brothers on one team, that would be hard to not do.
If you trade Nico Hischier, you would think that Jack would hold the captaincy?
I would think so.
You would think so. But, again, we're just talking out loud here. Could you do a deal without Hischier?
You could. You'd be giving up somebody like Seamus Casey. You'd be giving up a bunch of... You could. Absolutely, you could. It's a question of what...
Yeah.
It's a question of how much you want Quinn Hughes. That he's. Let me just take a look here. I think he's 23 years old.
No. He's older than that.
Quinn is 25.
Yeah.
So, all right. So he's coming into his prime. You have to ask yourself: does Quinn Hughes put you over the top? That's a tough analysis because they're both great players. But again, you're not going to get a player like that without giving up a significant amount. You may have to give up a Seamus Casey.
Yeah,
I don't know that I would do that.
Or Nemec as well, who was called up after Siegenthaler went out with an injury. So
yeah.
But all right, Bruce, Devils inconsistency becoming an issue.
Yeah, I mean, I think they've had a couple of games where they haven't played well, and you and I have mentioned this many times before. It bothers me when they do a number on Philadelphia 5-0, and then a couple nights later they get shellacked by the Sabres, who are one of the worst teams in the league. They played well the other night. They beat the Penguins and the refs in that 3-2 game that they won, and tonight they've got another. I just think that as we get further in the season, you've got to start banking those points, and we've seen some games this year where they have not played well against some teams that they should beat. Yeah. And I think that's one of the things that they've got to get under control as you get closer to the playoffs, because if you look at, and I know it's as early in the season to do that, but if you're looking at potential first round matchups, that's going to determine who you play in the first round. I mean, I'm not sure if I'm New Jersey. I'm not sure I want to play Carolina in the first round.
No. That will be a tough one.
And again, I think there's some things that Jersey needs to be able to handle a team like Carolina. We'll see what Tom Fitzgerald does. I still think that they need another Pat Maroon Tom Wilson type player to kind of keep the peace out there, and we'll see. But they've got to start banking these points, and hopefully Jacob Markstrom comes back soon. Jake Allen has done a great job in his absence, but at some point you need to put together a 4, 5, 6 game win streak and bank those points.
Absolutely. Well, Devils take on the Vegas Golden Knights tonight. That's going to be a good matchup with the Western Conference team. It could be, with Jake Allen still in net, and then afterwards they play Montreal this Saturday, and then the 2-week break. And it couldn't come at a better time for the Devils, as they've got some players on healing right now with Siegenthaler and Markstrom. Haula came back. I think right now, the next 2 games, see if the Devils finish it up strong. Game Day Live coming to you live shortly after we end this podcast. Short Sky and I will preview the game tonight. Devils Vegas at the Rock, and just want to thank all those tuning in. Thank you, Bruce. I hope you feel better.
Yeah, I've been under the weather for the past couple of days, which is why, unfortunately, we missed on Tuesday. I was really, really ill, which is unusual for me, but it's good to be back, and it's a great time of year as we inch up on the trade deadline, and next week we're going to have more on that because there's a lot of rumors flying around.
Yep.
And we'll be talking about some of those next week.
Yep, absolutely. All right, well, we're going to get out of here. It's good talking to you again, Bruce. You do sound a lot better. And, that's at the point. Till next time, let's go Devils.